The transport boarding area hummed with nervous energy as Admiral Chun and Maya approached the departure gate. Behind them, the crowd at the starport continued to grow as word spread through the station's communication networks. The three Imperial soldiers followed at a respectful distance. Their earlier arrogance completely evaporated. Maya skipped alongside her mother, completely unaware of the historic nature of what had just occurred. "Mama, why did those soldiers say such mean things about humans?" Admiral Chun considered the question carefully as they walked. "Sometimes, Sweet Pea, when people are afraid of something, they try to make themselves feel better by saying it's not really scary. Those soldiers have been taught that humans are weak because it makes them feel safer. But we're not weak, are we?" Maya asked, clutching Einstein the rabbit. "No, baby. We're not weak. We're just different." As they reached the boarding gate, a commotion erupted behind them. A new group of beings had arrived, high-ranking, Imperial officers by their elaborate uniforms and the way others moved aside for them. At their head strode a massive draconian general, his scaled hide bearing the scars of countless battles. General Vex was a legend in the Imperial military, known for his tactical brilliance and ruthless efficiency. "Admiral Chun," General Vex's voice boomed across the boarding area. "I came as soon as I received word that you were on the station." The transport workers and passengers froze as the two legendary officers faced each other. Admiral Chin turned calmly, still holding her daughter's hand. "General Vex, it's been a while. I believe the last time we met was at the surrender ceremony on Altair Prime." "Indeed." General Vex's reptilian features were unreadable, but there was something like respect in his golden eyes. "I wanted to personally apologize for the behavior of my subordinates. Their conduct was inappropriate." Behind him, Commanders Vex, Gorvik, and Lieutenant Crick stood at rigid attention, their faces showing various degrees of mortification and terror. "Children often say foolish things when they don't understand the world around them," Admiral Chun replied diplomatically. "No harm done?" Maya tugged on her mother's sleeve again. "Mama, is that the General Vex from your stories? The one from the Battle of the Binary Stars?" General Vex looked down at the small human child with surprise. "You know of the Binary Stars engagement, little one?" "Mama tells me bedtime stories about the war," Maya said proudly. "You're the one who figured out how to use the gravitational pull between the two stars to trap our ships. But then Mama turned your own strategy against you by—" "Maya," Admiral Chun interrupted gently. "I'm sure the General doesn't need to relive old battles." But General Vex held up a scaled hand. "Please, Admiral. I would be interested to hear how the battle is remembered in human accounts." Maya looked up at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Well, you used the star's gravity to make our ships crash into each other, which was really smart. But then Mama realized that if you could use gravity to trap ships, you could also use it to accelerate them. So she turned off all our engines and let the stars pull us in. But at the last second, she fired the engines again, and we came out going so fast that your ships couldn't track us." General Vex's head tilted in what might have been approval. An elegant solution to an impossible situation. "Your mother turned certain destruction into victory through pure ingenuity. And that's when you sent the message," Maya continued excitedly. "The one that said humans fight like the storms of Draken Prime, impossible to predict and devastating when they hit." The general's eyes widened slightly. "That message was sent on a secured Imperial frequency." "How could you possibly—" "We intercepted it," Admiral Chun said simply. "Along with quite a few others. Intelligence gathering is another area where being underestimated proves useful." A new voice cut through the conversation. "Admiral Chun?" A young human officer approached nervously, wearing the uniform of the transport service. "Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Peterson, the Transport Security Chief. We're honored to have you aboard, but I need to inform you that we've received a priority message for you." Admiral Chun accepted the datapad Peterson handed her, scanning its contents quickly. Her expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted almost imperceptibly. "Problem, Admiral?" General Vex asked, his military instincts recognizing the signs of developing crisis. "The Andromedans have finally made their move," Admiral Chun said quietly, handing the pad back to Peterson. 3 of their battle fleets just emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Centauri system. They're demanding the immediate surrender of all human colonies in the sector. General Vex's scales darkened to a deep purple, a sign of serious concern among his people. The AND are OMEDNS ... We've been tracking their military buildup for months. Our intelligence suggests they have technology that surpasses anything in the Empire's arsenal. That's what makes them dangerous, Admiral Chun agreed. Superior technology, vast numbers, and the absolute conviction that they're destined to rule the galaxy. Maya looked up at the adults around her, sensing the sudden tension but not understanding its source. Mama, are we still going home? Admiral Chun knelt down to her daughter's level, her expression gentle despite the crisis developing around them. There might be a change of plans, Sweet Pea. Mama might need to go to work for a while. But you just finished work, Maya protested. You said after this trip we could visit the butterfly gardens on New Earth. I know, baby. And we will, I promise. But sometimes there are emergencies that only certain people can handle. General Vex watched this exchange with growing understanding. Admiral, the Andromedans have over 400 ships in those fleets. Even our combined forces couldn't match that kind of firepower in a direct engagement. Admiral Chun stood up, her mind already shifting into tactical mode. Good thing we don't plan on a direct engagement. But Admiral, Lieutenant Peterson interjected, the news feeds are saying the Andromedans have some kind of new weapon. Something that can destroy entire planets from light years away. Impressive, Admiral Chun mused. Though I noticed they chose to demand surrender rather than simply demonstrating this weapon. Interesting tactical choice. She turned to General Vex. General, I don't suppose the Empire would be interested in a temporary cooperation agreement? The Andromedans won't stop with human colonies if they're successful here. General Vex's golden eyes glinted. What did you have in mind? Nothing too elaborate. Just a joint task force to deal with a common threat. Your ships have the heavy firepower we lack, and we have other assets that might prove useful. Around them, the boarding area had become an impromptu command center as officers from both sides began coordinating responses to the developing crisis. Maya sat on a nearby bench, her rabbit in her lap, watching the adults rush around with the patient resignation of a child accustomed to military life. Commander Vex, who had been silent since General Vex's arrival, finally found his voice. Admiral, if I may, what makes you think human tactics will work against the Andromedans? They're not like us. They don't think the way Imperial forces do. Admiral Chun looked at him with something approaching approval. That's actually an excellent question, Commander. You're right that the Andromedans think differently. They're logical, methodical, and utterly convinced of their own superiority. They approach warfare like a mathematical equation, input the correct variables, and achieve the desired outcome. And humans don't think that way, Lieutenant Crix observed. His earlier hostility replaced by genuine curiosity. Humans think warfare is jazz, Admiral Chun said with a slight smile. It's improvisation, rhythm, and finding harmony in chaos. You can't reduce it to an equation because the variables keep changing, and sometimes the most beautiful solutions come from breaking all the rules. General Vex nodded slowly. The Andromedans will expect us to respond with conventional tactics. Meet force with force, technology with technology? Exactly. But what if we don't? Admiral Chun pulled up a holographic display showing the Centauri system. What if instead of fighting their 3 fleets, we ignore them completely? Captain Gorvac, who had been listening intently, spoke up. Ignore them? But they're demanding surrender. They're demanding surrender because they want to test their new weapon without actually having to use it, Admiral Chun explained. The most expensive military hardware in the galaxy is the kind that gets destroyed in combat. Much better to achieve your goals through intimidation. Maya's voice carried clearly across the busy area. Mama always says bullies are usually scared of something. The assembled officers turned to look at the small girl, who was now braiding Einstein's ears with serious concentration. Out of the mouths of babes, General Vex murmured. What are they scared of, Admiral? Admiral Chun's smile broadened. They're scared that someone might figure out their super weapon isn't quite as super as they claim. Think about it. If you had a weapon that could destroy planets from light years away, would you announce it? Or would you just start destroying planets? The implications of this hit the group like a physical blow. Lieutenant Peterson was the first to speak. You think they're bluffing? I think they have something impressive that they want everyone to believe is more impressive than it actually is, Admiral Chun corrected. The question is, what are its real limitations? The silence stretched across the starport like a physical thing. Admiral Sarah Chun stood quietly beside her daughter, her presence somehow filling the space around them despite her unremarkable appearance. The Imperial soldiers who had been so confident moments before now looked like they had swallowed poison. Commander. Vex's scales had shifted to a pale yellow color that indicated extreme distress among his species. His forked tongue darted out repeatedly as he struggled to process what he had just heard. Admiral Chun. But the report said you were killed at the siege of Proxima Station. The entire Human Defense Force command structure was supposedly eliminated. Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated, Admiral Chun replied with the same calm tone she had been using all along. Though I understand the confusion. We found that allowing our enemies to underestimate us can be quite useful. Captain Gorvik, his 4 massive arms now hanging limply at his sides, stammered through his shock. But you're just a human. A female human. How could you possibly be the officer responsible for the liberation of the Tau Ceti system? Admiral Chun finished for him. The architect of the Kepler offensive that broke the Empire's stranglehold on the outer colonies? The person who turned a ragtag collection of human refugees into the most effective fighting force in 3 sectors? Maya looked up at her mother with obvious pride, though she remained quiet. She had heard these stories before, but seeing the effect they had on the aliens who had been mocking her was deeply satisfying. Lieutenant. Crix's compound eyes were darting frantically as he accessed his neural implant, pulling up classified Imperial files. His mandibles clicked nervously as he read. The Battle of Crimson Nebula ... impossible. The official reports say it was a fluke. Humans got lucky. Luck? Admiral Chun repeated thoughtfully. Is that what they're calling it now? Interesting interpretation of events? She looked around at the growing crowd of aliens who had been drawn by the commotion. Many of them were now whispering among themselves, and she could hear fragments of conversation in a dozen different languages. Word was spreading quickly through the station. The Crimson Nebula engagement wasn't luck, she continued, her voice carrying clearly through the corridor. It was careful planning, superior tactics, and the refusal to give up even when facing odds of 50-1. Very human traits, I'm told. Commander Vex found his voice again, though it came out as more of a hiss. Even if you are who you claim to be, you're still just one human. The Empire has billions of soldiers. Your species is still weak and scattered. Admiral Chun tilted her head slightly. Weak and scattered. Yes, I've heard that before. Usually right before we do something that surprises everyone. She paused, looking directly at each of the soldiers in turn. Tell me, Commander, how many of your billions of soldiers were involved in the recent attempt to retake the Vega system? Gorvak's gray skin flushed darker. The Vega operation is classified information. How could you possibly know about it? Admiral Chin's smile widened slightly. Because we were the ones who stopped it. 3 Imperial fleets, over 200 ships, thousands of your finest warriors. All turned back by what your intelligence reports probably called a small human patrol. The crowd around them had grown significantly. And Admiral Chun noticed several beings, discreetly recording the conversation with their personal devices. Good. Let the word spread. That's impossible, Crix insisted. No human force could stand against 3 full Imperial fleets. The math simply doesn't work. You're right about the math, Admiral Chun agreed. By every logical calculation, we should have been destroyed in the first 5 minutes of engagement. But there's something your empire has never understood about humans. She knelt down beside Maya, who handed her the stuffed rabbit. Admiral Chun held it gently, showing no embarrassment at the childish toy. My daughter's rabbit here is named Einstein, she said conversationally. Einstein was a human scientist who lived over 1,000 years ago. He once said that imagination is more important than knowledge. Your empire has vast knowledge, superior technology, overwhelming numbers, but you lack imagination. Commander Thex slithered closer, his confidence returning slightly. Pretty words, but imagination doesn't stop plasma cannons or deflect missile strikes, doesn't it? Admiral Chun stood up again, still holding the rabbit. At Vega, your commanders expected us to fight the way your species fight. Stand and trade shots until the side with more firepower wins? Very logical, very predictable. She handed the rabbit back to Maya, who hugged it close. Instead, we did something your tactical computers never considered. We ran away. The Imperial soldiers exchanged confused glances. Captain Gorvak was the first to speak. You ran away? That proves our point about human cowardice. We ran away, Admiral Chun continued, leading your fleets through the asteroid fields of the Vega system. Your ships are powerful, but they're also large and unwieldy. Perfect for open space combat, terrible for navigating tight spaces at high speed. Lieutenant Crix's eyes widened as understanding began to dawn. The asteroid fields, but the gravitational effects would make it impossible to maintain formation. Exactly. Your 3 fleets became 3 collections of individual ships, each trying to navigate independently while chasing targets that knew every rock, every gravitational eddy, every hiding place in the system. Admiral Chun's voice took on a lecturing tone, as if she were briefing junior officers. Humans have been fighting in asteroids for centuries. We know how to use them as cover, as weapons, as shields. We know how to make big ships crash into rocks while small ships dance between them. It's not about being brave or cowardly, it's about using your environment. But our casualties ... Double Quo-vested weakly. Were significant, Admiral Chun agreed. 47 ships lost, including 2 dreadnoughts. Over 10,000 of your personnel killed or captured. All because you assumed humans would fight fair. The crowd around them had grown silent, hanging on every word. Admiral Chun noticed several Imperial citizens among them, their expressions ranging from shock to something that might have been admiration. The thing about humans, she continued, is that we don't fight fair. We can't afford to. We're smaller, weaker, shorter-lived than most galactic species. So we fight smart. We fight dirty when we have to. And we never, ever give up. Maya tugged on her mother's sleeve. Mama, are we going to miss our transport? Admiral Chun checked her chronometer and nodded. Soon, sweet pea. But I think these officers had a few more questions about human weakness. Commander Thex's scales had shifted through several color changes during the conversation. Even if everything you say is true, the Empire will adapt. We'll learn to counter your tactics. Of course you will, Admiral Chun agreed cheerfully. That's what makes it interesting. You'll adapt to our current methods, so we'll develop new ones. You'll build defenses against our weapons, so we'll invent different weapons. You'll train your soldiers to expect our tactics, so we'll surprise them with completely different tactics. She gestured around at the diverse crowd surrounding them. That's what humans do. We adapt, we improvise. We refuse to accept that something is impossible just because it's never been done before. Your empire conquered hundreds of worlds by following the same basic strategy every time. It worked because most species think in predictable patterns. And humans don't? Crix asked, though his tone had lost much of its mockery. Humans are chaos, Admiral Chun said simply. Organized, directed chaos. We're the species that looked at faster-than-light travel and said, but what if we could go sideways through space instead of forward? We're the ones who took orbital mechanics and turned it into an art form. We're the civilization that figured out how to make friends with species that originally wanted to eat us. She looked directly at Commander Thex. Your empire rules through fear and overwhelming force. Very effective against rational opponents who make logical decisions based on survival instincts. But humans aren't entirely rational, and our survival instincts are unusual. The transport announcement echoed through the corridor in multiple languages. Final boarding call for Transport 77 Alpha to the Centauri system. That's us, Admiral Chun said, taking Maya's hand. Time to go, sweet pea. As they started to walk away, Captain Gorvok called after them. Admiral Chun. The stories about Terra Nova, about the human soldiers who held the line against impossible odds. Those are real? Admiral Chun paused and looked back at him. Captain, every human child knows the story of Terra Nova, how 200 human Marines held off 5,000 Imperial shock troops for 6 hours. How they sang while they fought, even as their numbers dwindled. How the last surviving Marine, a young woman named Lisa Rodriguez, stood alone on the ramparts and kept firing until reinforcements arrived. Maya's voice piped up clearly in the silence. And when they asked her why she didn't surrender, she said, because someone has to hold the line. Admiral Chun squeezed her daughter's hand. That's right, baby. Someone always has to hold the line. Commander Thex's voice was barely audible. Rodriguez. I know that name. She's the one they call the Iron Rose. She's still alive? She's my second in command, Admiral Chun replied matter-of-factly. And she still doesn't know how to surrender. The massive starport on Kepler Station buzzed with activity as beings from across the galaxy moved through its corridors. Towering Zephyrions with their crystalline skin caught the artificial sunlight, while snake-like vortex slithered between the legs of hulking Bruthan warriors. The air hummed with a dozen different languages and the constant drone of departure. Announcements dot in the center of this chaos. A small human girl sat alone on a metal bench, her legs swinging freely as they didn't quite reach the floor. 9-year-old Maya Chun clutched a worn stuffed rabbit against her chest, her dark eyes wide as she watched the alien parade before her. Her black hair was tied in 2 neat braids, and she wore a simple blue jumpsuit that marked her as a passenger on the refugee transport. Look at that pathetic little creature, hissed Commander Thex, a tall Vorthok officer whose scales gleamed purple under the lights. His snake-like head turned toward his companions, a group of Imperial soldiers from various species. Humans are so weak and small. How did such a worthless species even survive long enough to leave their mudball planet? The other soldiers laughed, their various forms of amusement creating a cacophony of sounds. A Bruthan captain named Gorvik stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the little girl. His gray skin was covered in battle scars and his forearms flexed as he moved. The Empire should have wiped them out when we had the chance, Gorvik rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. Instead, we let them scatter across the galaxy like vermin. Now look what we have to deal with. Maya looked up at the towering alien, her small hand tightening on her rabbit. She didn't speak, but her chin lifted slightly in a gesture of quiet defiance that seemed almost familiar to those who knew how to look for it. Awe. The little human thinks she's brave, sneered Lieutenant Crix, a mantis-like Zelhari whose compound eyes glittered with cruel amusement. Tell me, little one, where are your parents? Did they abandon you here like the cowards all humans are? Maya's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried clearly in the sudden quiet that had fallen around them. My mama is coming for me. She's just running late from her meeting. The soldiers erupted in laughter again. Commander Thex's forked tongue flicked out as he spoke. Your mama? And what could a human female possibly be doing that's more important than watching her spawn? Cleaning floors? Serving real warriors their meals? Maybe she's begging for scraps in the lower levels, suggested Captain Gorvek, his 4 hands gesturing dismissively. That's about all humans are good for. Manual labor and entertainment for their betters. Maya's dark eyes flashed, and for just a moment something flickered there that made the older beings pause. But they were too caught up in their mockery to notice properly. The galaxy would be better off without your kind, Lieutenant Crix continued, clicking his mandibles together. Weak, emotional, short-lived creatures with no real purpose. The Empire conquered your world so easily because humans have no spine, no real fighting spirit. That's not true, Maya said quietly, her voice growing stronger. Humans are brave. My mama told me about the last stand at Terra Nova and the Battle of the Crimson Nebula and fairy tales. Commander Thex interrupted, his tail lashing with amusement. Human propaganda to make their children feel better about being such failures. No human has ever accomplished anything meaningful in warfare. The crowd of aliens around them had grown, drawn by the spectacle. Some looked uncomfortable with the soldiers' behavior, but none dared to intervene. The Empire's military was not known for tolerating interference, especially when it came to their treatment of the lesser species. Meow stood up on the bench, making herself a little taller, though she was still dwarfed by the massive aliens surrounding her. My mama says humans fight differently than other species. She says we don't give up even when everyone thinks we should. Your mama sounds like she's filling your head with nonsense, Gorvik boomed. No human has the courage to stand against the Empire. They all run and hide like the vermin they are. Humans are so weak that even their children are pathetic, added Crix, gesturing at Maya with one of his blade-like arms. Look at this one. Probably can't even lift her own body weight. In my species, younglings this age can already hunt and kill prey twice their size. Maya hugged her rabbit closer, but her voice didn't waver. Mama says being strong isn't about how big you are or how many arms you have. She says it's about not giving up when things get scary. How touching, Commander Thex said with mock sympathy. The little human has learned her lessons well. Tell me, child, what does your mama do for a living? Besides filling your head with lies about human bravery? She works for the government, Maya replied simply. This sent the soldiers into fresh peals of laughter. The government, wheezed Gorvak. Probably a secretary or a janitor. That's about as high as humans can rise in civilized society. I bet she files papers all day, suggested Crix. Or maybe she serves coffee to the real decision-makers. Humans in government. Thex shook his head in apparent disbelief. The Empire only allows them in the most menial positions. Your mama probably spends her days cleaning up after her betters. Maya's jaw set in a stubborn line that would have been recognizable to anyone who had served in the military. My mama helps keep people safe. Safe from what? Gorvik laughed. Paperwork accidents? Spilled coffee? The mockery continued for several more minutes, with the soldiers taking turns making increasingly cruel jokes about humans in general and Maya's mother in particular. The little girl endured it all with a composure that was remarkable for someone her age, though her knuckles were white where she gripped her stuffed rabbit, finally. The crowd began to part as footsteps echoed through the corridor. The soldiers were too engaged in their entertainment to notice at first, still laughing and making jokes about human weakness. Perhaps we should find this mama of yours, Commander Thex was saying. I'd like to meet the human female who raised such a deluded child. Maybe we can teach her a proper lesson about knowing her place in the galaxy. That won't be necessary. The voice cut through the noise like a plasma blade through steel. Every conversation in the immediate area stopped. The soldiers turned, still chuckling, ready to dismiss whatever human had dared to interrupt their fun. A woman walked toward them through the parting crowd, her steps measured and purposeful. She was of average human height, with the same dark hair as Maya, though hers was pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a simple black uniform with no visible insignia, and her face was calm, almost serene. "Mama!" Maya called out, relief flooding her voice. The woman's eyes never left the soldiers as she approached, but her voice was gentle when she spoke to her daughter. "I'm sorry I'm late, sweet pea. My meeting ran longer than expected." Commander Thex slithered forward, his confidence unshaken. "Ah, the famous mama arrives. Tell me, human, what important government work kept you from properly supervising your offspring?" The woman looked at him with the kind of patience usually reserved for particularly slow children. "I was briefing the Joint Chiefs on the new defense protocols for the Outer Rim territories." Gorvik laughed loudly. "The Joint Chiefs? Did you hear that, boys? The little human thinks she talks to the Joint Chiefs. Next, she claims she knows the Emperor personally. The Joint Chiefs of what?" Crix added mockingly. "The sanitation department?" The woman reached Maya and placed a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. Maya, gather your things. Our transport leaves in 20 minutes. Now wait just a minute, Commander Thex said, his voice taking on a more aggressive tone. We're not finished with our conversation. I think you need to learn some respect for your betters. Your child has been spreading lies about human courage, and I think someone needs to teach both of you about reality. The woman looked up at the massive Vorthak commander with those same calm eyes. And what reality would that be, Commander? The reality that humans are weak, worthless creatures who serve at the pleasure of their betters, Gorvak interjected. The reality that your kind should be grateful for whatever scraps the Empire throws you. The reality that you should teach your spawn proper respect instead of filling her head with fantasies about human bravery, added Crix. The woman nodded slowly, as if considering their words carefully. I see. And you believe this because you've studied human military history extensively. The soldiers exchanged glances, surprised by the question. Commander Thex recovered first. We know enough. Humans have never accomplished anything significant in warfare. Your species folded like paper when the Empire arrived at Earth. Interesting perspective, the woman said mildly. Maya, do you have everything? The little girl nodded, sliding down from the bench with her rabbit tucked safely under one arm. As she did, a small identification card fell from her pocket and clattered on the floor. Lieutenant Crix, always quick to spot an opportunity for more mockery, snatched it up before Maya could retrieve it. Let's see what kind of important government work Mama really does, he said, reading the card aloud. Maya Chun, age 9, dependent of. His compound eyes widened as he read the name. The card fell from his suddenly nerveless grip as if it had burst into flames. What does it say? Demanded Commander Thex, irritated by his subordinate's sudden silence. Crix's voice came out as barely a whisper. Admirals.